I want to welcome you to this installment of Chevy Chase at Home's guest speakers series, Reinventing Yourself in Retirement with Dian Seidel. As you may know, Chevy Chase at Home engages adults 55 and over in social and educational programming, both in person and virtually. We also provide volunteer services to older adults who need assistance to remain at home, including rides, tech support, and minor household chores. And now I'd like to introduce our wonderful speaker for this afternoon, Dian Seidel. Dian used to be a climate scientist at NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So I guess she gets the credit for our wonderful weather today. Thank you, Dian. Now in retirement, Dian teaches yoga at local gyms, teaches English to immigrants in the DC area, and writes. Her essays have appeared in Passenger, Anak Sastra, Lucky Jefferson, Pen in Hand, the New York Times, and Bethesda Magazine. Thank you, Dian, for being with us today. Please take it away.
Thanks so much, John. I'm going to share a presentation with you. So I'll share my screen. Give me just a moment to do that. Yeah, so as John said, the title is Reinventing Yourself in Retirement. And I should say from the outset that I am not an expert in retirement. I don't have any kind of certification in retirement coaching. I haven't done research. I'm just going to present my own story about retirement, and hopefully that will resonate or maybe help to inform some of your ideas on the subject. And I'd love to have a conversation with you all afterwards. So I'll leave some time at the end for discussion and questions and answers. So, questions for you to think about. Have you ever done any of these things? Maybe dreamed of doing something completely different when you retire? Maybe have you ever volunteered as an English teacher or a tutor? Have you ever worked abroad? Have you ever taught little children? Have you ever been to Thailand? Have you ever considered publishing, or maybe you have actually published a memoir? We're going to touch a little bit on all of these topics today, and we'll talk about my experiences, and maybe yours are similar, maybe a little different. But first of all, who am I? John gave a lovely introduction. Thank you for that. But maybe because we're all here, and most of us are here in Chevy Chase, maybe you think you know me. Maybe my name's familiar. Maybe my face is a little familiar. So I'm a neighbor. I also live in Chevy Chase. I'm in the town of Chevy Chase. I was a Montgomery County Public Schools parent, so maybe our lives have intersected somewhere during our kids' school years. As John said, I'm a former NOAA climate scientist. Former NOAA. That's hard for a person from Boston like me to say without saying former NOAA climate scientist. I'm also a yogi. Maybe we've seen each other in yoga classes here, there, and anon, and I swim. So perhaps we've intersected at the pool, but maybe you don't recognize me because I had goggles on then. So about retirement, I recently listened to a TED Talk on the subject by Riley Moynes. And Riley has a concept of retirement as evolving in 4 phases. And I think it's a useful construct. So let's briefly review his ideas. So according to Riley, the first phase of retirement is the vacation phase. Here, this is the time when you don't have to answer an alarm clock. Maybe you don't even set an alarm anymore in the morning. You don't have work to do. You don't have deadlines to meet. You don't have a boss breathing down your neck. You're free. So what do? You sleep late. You do things that are fun for you. Maybe that involves travel. I think for many of us, we know people for whom retirement is their dream for retirement is traveling around the world, and they do it with great enthusiasm. So that's the first phase, according to Riley. Vacation phase, fun, fun, fun. The second phase, he says, is different. It's the phase of loss. So not so much fun, fun, fun. And the loss in many cases might be a sense of loss for yourself, that you no longer identify yourself with your old job. For many of us, that was really the primary way we thought about ourselves associated with our professional work. Um, Dave Oldfield, who was the speaker in last month's presentation to Chevy Chase at Home, spoke specifically about this issue and how much of a sense of loss many of us feel when we no longer have our work to anchor us. The loss could be different, though. It may be the loss of a partner, maybe of friends. This is the age where we start to lose people close to us, or it may be something different. Then he says we move on to meaningful activity. And what he meant by that in his talk was where we take the skills that we developed during our working years and meaningfully apply them to other activities. So here in this little picture, you see someone with gray hair, maybe going back to where they used to work and helping younger colleagues, advance in their careers, or maybe having some connection there, or maybe getting involved with professional societies or something like that related to their previous work. And then he says we move away from that we no longer feel the attachment to that previous life, but we reinvent ourselves. And often it's a reinvention that involves service to the community, or service to family, service to friends, but somehow doing something still meaningful, but in a new way, a reinvention. So, I love these kinds of rubrics where things are laid out in simple steps for the 4 phases of retirement, for example. They're great for thinking about, but they don't always apply specifically to every individual circumstance. And they didn't actually apply in my case. So I'm going to tell you my story. My story is told in my new book, Kindergarten at 60, A Memoir of Teaching in Thailand, which came out in June. And I tell about what I did in retirement. So Riley Moyne's first phase, the vacation phase, that was not what I did in retirement. I didn't want to travel when I retired. I actually don't enjoy flying, and so I'm not eager to be running around the world. And I actually feared the idea of not having something specific to do day one after I retired. So I didn't have a vacation phase in my early retirement months and years. I also didn't have a loss phase uh, after retiring. It came later. It came with the pandemic. It was a sense of loss, of course, that we all felt all around the world. But that wasn't something that happened to me right away. I was enthused by retiring, not feeling lost. The meaningful activity phase did happen, but not as phase 3. Um, excuse me. It happened later. So for me, the reinvention phase was what I did right away. I retired and I reinvented myself, or at least I tried to, through service activities. And the meaningful activity where you reconnect with your former professional self has come for me, but that came afterwards. So, how did I reinvent myself? First, I reinvented myself by teaching English to immigrants. Since 2016, I've been a volunteer teacher at Washington English Center. And I'm showing this photo here with the logo for the center and the website of the center because I really want to give a shout out to this organization. It's a school that's now located downtown near Gallery Place Metro. Used to be in Kalorama neighborhood when I first started. And it's a wonderful place. If any of you have any interest in volunteering, you don't have to be a certified teacher or even have any experience to teach there. But I found and still do find teaching there to be wonderfully fulfilling. In fact, today our class is having a graduation ceremony right as we speak. So I'm here instead, but I really regret that I wasn't able to go to the party for our level 3A students who come from all over the world and have been such a joy to work with. So that was my first step in reinventing myself. Then I also reinvented myself by becoming a yoga teacher. I'd been practicing yoga for decades, and I wanted to continue to practice, but I was a little worried that I might not always have the opportunity to go to classes in person in a studio, that maybe I would take a vacation or something like that, and not have a studio nearby. So I thought I'd learn to become a teacher so that I could teach myself. And that worked out uh, well. I was able to feel better in my own practice, but I also took it unexpectedly to the next level, and now I do actually teach classes locally. And then I also got involved with writing. And another shout out here to the Writers Center in Bethesda. So, if any of you in retirement dream of writing the great American novel or beautiful poetry or whatever, or perhaps a memoir, I can really highly recommend the resources that the Writers Center offers for writers of all stages, at all stages in their writing life, and with all sorts of genres of interest and approaches to the craft of writing. So we are so fortunate in this area to have resources like the Writers Center for retirees and non-retirees. But the real story that I tell in the book is about teaching in Thailand. So the question that I asked is, how did these American retirees, that's me and my husband Steve in the picture, end up in kindergarten in Thailand? Well, it stemmed from our work at the Washington English Center. As I said, I started teaching there in 2016. Steve, my husband, started teaching there in 2017 after he retired, or maybe 2018. Anyhow, after he retired a year or two after I did. And we both loved it. And we thought, well, this is fun. And maybe we could combine the idea of retirement as vacation, retirement as travel, with service, with teaching. So we thought maybe we could take that show on the road. So this is a photo of Steve and me. After a couple of years teaching at Washington English Center, we wanted to go abroad to teach. But we were told that it's useful to have a certification to do that, that schools in other countries would recognize a couple different certifications, and that the best one to have was the CELTA certification. There happened to be a school in Washington, teaching house, that trains you to teach English using a Cambridge University curriculum. And it's considered sort of the gold standard of certifications. So we did an intensive course in teaching English to speakers of other languages, which is now abbreviated ESOL. Uh, you may have heard ESL, English as a second language. The term ESOL is also used a little more commonly now. And we were really excited to go abroad. So we started to apply for jobs all around the world, excuse me. Our only restriction was that we wanted to be in a place with a relatively mild climate. We didn't want to be in a very hot part of the world or a very cold part of the world. I don't like heat and humidity. So we thought mid latitudes. Well, that's a huge part of it. There's many choices of countries in the mid latitudes. Um, but when we sent out our applications and applied for openings, we got very little response, very poor response. And we couldn't understand why. We had experience, we had these certifications, we were available whenever people wanted us. We weren't going to be asking for tons of money. We were mostly interested in the opportunity, but the responses were not forthcoming. Why, we asked ourselves. Well, I don't know for sure, but I strongly suspect it was our age. That in some countries, there is mandatory retirement age that we both exceeded. So we weren't able to get work permits. We wouldn't have been able to get work permits. And I think also there's a concept that English teachers abroad are young people, and our gray hair took us out of the running. So I really feel that that was a limitation that we completely didn't expect. But one thing came through. There was one place where we had the possibility of working, and that was Thailand, which did not meet our first criterion, which is a mild climate. Thailand has a very hot, humid climate. And it also didn't meet our second criterion, which was to teach adults, or if not adults, maybe high school students. We didn't really want to teach little children. We'll see how that worked out. Um, our only problem once we decided to go to Thailand was what to do with Minerva. So, what you see there is a picture of our little cat, Minerva, who was actually our daughter's cat, but she became allergic to Minerva. So Minerva is now our cat, and the idea of leaving for several months or maybe a year even and finding a home for Minerva was our biggest challenge. We did find a family that was able to foster her, but that was our hugest worry before leaving. Finally, we did go to Thailand, and here's a photo of a bunch of English teachers getting ready to go off to various assignments across the country in Thailand. The picture is taken in Chiang Mai, which is in the northern part of the country. And I'm showing you this to give you a sense of what a typical English teacher in Thailand looks like. So here we are at a rice farm, at a rice paddy in Chiang Mai. You'll see the two Thai farmers over here on the right side of your screen, properly dressed with protective headgear and clothing that covers their skin, useful way to dress in the sun. The only other two people who are similarly covered and protected are these two. That's me and Steve. We're probably older than the Thai people here, and we're definitely older than all of these other teachers here, um, who have no common sense at all. They're out, showing lots of skin in the broiling hot sun. But my point is simply that the majority of teachers, as I said before, are in their 20s. They're doing maybe gap years. Perhaps some of them are school teachers that want a little break from public school teaching. And this is your typical English teacher abroad, not a retiree. Here's a map of Thailand. Up in the north, you see Chiang Mai, where that previous photo was taken. We were assigned to work in a school in Pathum Thani province, which is in central Thailand, about an hour's travel north of the capital, Bangkok. So we were at about 13 degrees north latitude, the deep tropics, very hot, very humid. When we got to our school, we were housed in an apartment building for teachers across the alleyway from the school building. This picture was taken in our living room. We had a little housewarming party, and the other people who are here are the other women who are here, they're all women, were the other teachers from the apartment building. And this picture, to my mind, resembles the other picture. All of these teachers are, if they're 30, they're not 31. They're all in their 20s. These are young women. Some of them are from Thailand per se, and a bunch of others are from the Philippines, which is a source of a lot of the educators in Thailand. And then you see these folks who are old enough to be their grandparents and maybe even older than that. That's me and Steve again, being the odd people out in the room. And here you see a photo of our classroom. This is the kindergarten that Steve and I taught in. In Thailand, kindergarten starts at age 2.5. These are the old kids in school. So they're the 4-year-olds. Here I am teaching them, reading to them, and you'll see that this classroom has a lot of English in it. This was an English immersion kindergarten within a larger school in Thailand. And we obviously we didn't fish our wish, or fish our wish, right? And get to teach adults. And we certainly we're not teaching high school kids, but we're teaching very little children. So all of the things we learned in our training program, our CELTA course, about how to teach grammar and how to teach conversation skills and how to teach writing and paragraph structure and yada, 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 were completely unnecessary for teaching kindergarten. All we really had to do was speak English, and these little kids picked it up. Here's a picture of Steve. He had the honor of being not only a classroom teacher, but also the PE instructor. So here's Steve and the kids going for a little run around the track at school. And you can see that some of the really little ones, here's a couple who are 2 years old. The others are 3 and 4. This photo shows our Thanksgiving celebration at school. We arrived in Thailand in October of 2019, and a month later, Thanksgiving rolled around. I wasn't going to, and part of our job involved cooking with the kids. We made lunch with them. It was a Montessori school, so kids have to learn how to cook and wash dishes and all of that. And so here we were making little miniature pumpkin pies for Thanksgiving. There are Thai pumpkins, and we roasted pumpkin and we blended it up, and we used little muffin tins to make individual pumpkin pies, which the children actually really enjoyed. They didn't enjoy all the American foods we tried to introduce. Here's a photo of the building that we lived in. I showed you our apartment with the teachers during our housewarming party. This is the apartment building, and as I said, it's across the street from the school where we worked. This is the kitchen in the apartment. We had the luxury apartment. Each apartment had 3 rooms. I'll show you in the building. So each apartment had a door off of this balcony and 3 rooms. In general, the apartments had 3 teachers, one in each bedroom, and a very small cooking area in the back. We, for the 2 of us, had all 3 rooms to ourselves. One room as a bedroom, one room as a living room, and one room as a kitchen. This is the kitchen. This is our refrigerator. So we were able to keep things cold. We had a microwave, which we used for nothing other than putting things in as storage so that the ants wouldn't get to the food. And we had no other cooking facilities. We didn't have a stove um, or anything else to prepare meals. So all of our meals were either cold or perhaps microwave leftovers. And we had to eat outside at the street food vendors near our school every night, and lunches we had with the children based on our joint cooking adventures in the classroom. People ask me sometimes, "Kun putภาษาไทยได้ไหม?" Do you speak the Thai language? And I'll say that I probably mispronounced that sentence, because the answer is unfortunately no. We tried to learn some Thai before leaving using recorded audio courses. We took classes or lessons with one of the teachers at school. So we exchanged English lessons for Thai lessons. And we became fluent enough so that we could ask for directions and order food and pay for things and know how to count money, and a few other basic survival skills, but we never really learned the language. Why not? 2 reasons. One is that Thai is a tonal language. It has 5 tones, and it's really hard for an old person, a retiree, to hear those tones. Our brains are no longer wired to hear the tonality of language. So that a language that you might easily pick up when you're a child is much harder to pick up as an adult if it's tonal. The other reason is this alphabet that I'm showing here. Thai alphabet has 44 letters. They are beautiful. They're also extremely complicated, and there are many that look a lot like others. If you look at this group, for example, up here in the top center, it's really hard to find the distinctions between some of these letters. So basically, we were illiterate in Thailand, couldn't read signs, couldn't write our names, couldn't read our names. But fortunately, we were able to manage moderately well in English. And part of that was because as I said, our school was an English immersion school. So what did I learn in kindergarten at age 60? First of all, the best laid plans of retirees oft go awry, or RE, as my father used to say. As I said, our hopes were to teach someplace maybe in Eastern Europe or maybe in South America or someplace with a moderate climate and teaching adults. We ended up in a very hot, humid climate teaching little children. And if you want to hear some of our adventures or learn about some of our adventures, you can read the book or listen to the audiobook version. But that's something you have to roll with in retirement. You may have plans; they may not work out, but there will be other opportunities, and they may prove to be equally worthwhile, equally fun. Secondly, in retirement, do you want to travel? You can leave your parents behind. I left my mother, who will be turning 100 next month, behind, and we kept in touch. But there was certainly concern about doing that. You can leave your grown kids behind; they're on their own. But it's tough to leave your cat or your dog. Leaving those pets in someone else's care it's a tough one. Um, Thirdly, learning a new language in your 60s ain't easy, and some languages are harder than others. I think we picked one of the toughest ones. You saw our apartment. We didn't have much stuff there. We didn't bring much stuff other than a suitcase full of drugstore items because we were concerned about not having access to things that we might need. But we didn't bring much stuff from home, and our place didn't have much in the way of furnishings. But that was actually super liberating. Talk about the desire to declutter one's life. Try something like this, and you'll experience how much you can do without. It's really very refreshing. And then when we came home, I started writing. We came home on March 3rd of 2020. You all know what happened on March 13th of 2020. We all went into COVID lockdown. I had just returned from traveling, from teaching, and I had been writing messages home to friends and family, missives from Thailand, I called them. And people loved them. They said, "Don't come home. We want to keep getting your misses. We can't wait for the next installment." So when we got home, someone suggested, "You should write a book." Well, what did I know about writing a book? Nothing. But I took courses. I took virtual courses through the Writer Center, and I learned how to put together a story. So I'm going to end here with a quote from the book near the end about our story and about retirement. Steve and I aren't pups. There was a line before this, something about not since Hector was a pup. Steve and I aren't pups, but our days of throwing caution to the wind are behind us. But neither are we content to stay home and take life easy. We're at that stage of life, relatively new to our species, called active retirement. I don't know how a demographer or a sociologist would define it, but I'd say it's a time when you're still willing, if sensibly somewhat hesitant, to go outside your comfort zone and do something worthwhile. The challenge is you never know how far outside or how worthwhile until you give it a try. So, as I mentioned earlier, that whole story from the preparations for leaving, uh, for trying to get a job abroad, all the work that we did stateside before leaving, to our arrival in Thailand and our adventure teaching and return home are told in this book, Kindergarten at 60, which is available in local bookstores. And in particular, I'd like to point out for you locals that there's a book fair at the Busboys and Poets in Tacoma Park on Saturday, and I'll be there with 29 other local authors signing books if you're interested popping by there. Books also in libraries. It's available online, and there's an audiobook version as well if you're an audiobook listener, as I am, big fan. For more information about the book, you can go to my website, dianseidel.com. So that's the end of the presentation. I'll stop sharing now so that we can have a little conversation.
Thanks, Diane, for sharing that fascinating adventure. I'm sure a lot of us feel it would be great to do that, but a little bit intimidated by the process and everything you must have had to go through. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about things like how you got certified and how you got your visas. I mean, was it a big ordeal, or did things go smoothly?
Yeah, so the certification process was fairly smooth because that was a program, and as I said, there was a teaching house. Teaching house is an international thing, and Washington D.C. had a teaching house at that time. It closed during the pandemic, and now it's just a virtual program. But we just got on the metro every day for a month and did this intensive and super intensive 1 month program where basically we were doing nothing else for the month and learned how to teach really, and that was a very, very useful program. The other parts, the other logistical parts that you mentioned about visas and work permits and things like that is not easy. What we ended up doing, and I didn't discuss this much, was working through a program that helps would-be teachers abroad get placements. So our program was based in, I think, Minnesota, and but works with people all around the country. And it had partnered programs in many other countries. The one that we partnered with, of course, was Thailand. And actually, as it turned out, the director of the Thai program, which is called Explore Asia, grew up in Chevy Chase. It was this huge coincidence when we got there that someone who grew up, a few blocks away from us. So those two programs helped facilitate the visa stuff, which in the case of Thailand is complicated. There's a long process that involves uh, uh, showing college degrees. You have to send your original college diploma, which for us those were deep buried in files. We had to find them. Steve actually had to write away to his university for a copy. He couldn't find his. And the work permits and the health insurance and the yada yada yada. It did help us a lot to have a program. You do pay for that service though, so you know, it's something that we hadn't anticipated, but that was the only way we were going to get to go abroad. We just weren't having any luck any other way.
Let me just remind all of you that you can ask a question in the chat, or you can raise your hand. And I see someone's got their hand raised. I can only identify you as diagnostics, but please ask your question. Go ahead. Kristen is going to try to unmute you. There you.
Okay, I should say, is that I?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you, Diane. I want to say, first of all, from your introduction, is that it sounded so much like me. I retired from the World Bank 9 years ago. And the first thing I did was take classes from Montgomery College in how to teach English to speakers of other languages. I also had in mind for a long time to write a novel. And I went to the Writers Center, which was extremely helpful with that. And I'm happy to say that I published my novel in this past June. And in fact, I'm hoping in due course to make a presentation on the novel to Chevy Chase at home, because I'm also a volunteer member there. And I also, before I did the novel, actually, the other thing I did was, you mentioned service. I joined a giving circle, which was a group of women who pool funds to make grants to local nonprofits. And I've stayed very active with them, either on the board or as grant committee co-chair. So your talk really, really resonated with me. And I would also encourage people to explore these things. I mean, the thing that I found actually so delightful was particularly taking classes in, whatever you might think you never would have done, such as writing a novel. And, especially nowadays, you can do so many of them online. It's really convenient. So thanks very much for your talk. I enjoyed it.
Well, and thank you for echoing these same sentiments. The and congratulations on your new book. Tell us the title and where we can get it.
Well, it's called Magda Standing. It's a historical fiction novel loosely based on some family history. It's set in Pittsburgh in 1916 to 1919. So it's during the period of the First World War and the Spanish flu. And I was actually writing it during COVID, but that was purely coincidental. It is available online everywhere. And I've done some author talks, but I'll check out Busboys and Poets, because I didn't know about that particular opportunity, even though it's probably too late for it now. But yeah, so Magda Standing.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Something to look up.
Any other
Thank you.
questions out there or comments? I have one more question that I'm interested in, and that is you said at the beginning you weren't interested in travel, and you said at the end your time for throwing caution to the wind has gone, but you did this thing that was a great adventure, and I just wonder emotionally how you managed that. Did your husband urge you and push you in this direction, or
Yeah.
was it uncomfortable for you?
Yeah, so I was a little flippant in saying that I wasn't interested in travel. Um, I'm interested in being in other places and living in other places and learning about other places. That's definitely of interest. What I don't like is moving. I have a bit of a fear of flying. It's not comfortable for me. So the idea of, bouncing around in an airplane and being in a different city, every other day doesn't appeal to me. But learning about different places and getting to know communities is of interest. And so, I'm willing to get on a plane and then stay put for a while before I have to get on another plane before coming back. So that was part of it. And yes, Steve was more keen to travel than I was because he's more comfortable doing that. We have since so with regard to the difficulties that you referred to earlier with visas and such like that, and the point that I made earlier about the difficulty of finding a job, we have since found opportunities to teach abroad as volunteers, not as paid people, but as volunteers. Where and I'll mention the program that we went to Italy last year, to Sicily, to teach English to middle schoolers through Global Volunteers. And so this was a much shorter stint. It was much less complicated to arrange because we didn't need a work permit, we didn't need visas, and so I am interested in being part of a community that's not my community for some time, but less as a tourist, more as someone who's somehow connected with the local people. So I'm hoping that we're able to do that again. A shorter term teaching stint. It was very rewarding. And also very challenging, but when you're doing something for a short amount of time, you can stick it out. It's all good, right?
We do have a couple questions in the chat. This is from Doris Ross. She asks, how did you like teaching kindergarten?
Doris, yes, thanks for the question. At first, I was a complete failure. I mean, I think if Steve hadn't been there, I definitely would have given up the ghost, given it up. It was exhausting. I had I'm hearing a little bit of feedback. I'm not sure if that's coming from my end or not. Um, anyway, it I had no skills at classroom management. The children wouldn't stay still. We had to teach this curriculum to them that involved math and geography and science, and these are tiny little children. I thought they should be napping and playing on the playground. But there was a curriculum. I was a disaster at it. And as it turned out, I didn't get much help from the existing staff. But over time, things got better, uh, and um, and there was also an end in sight. We stayed for 5 months, a school term, and we always had that kind of end date in mind. Actually, we were crossing days off the calendar. Some days were so difficult. I mean, I told you about teaching, about cooking with the children. Uh, I mean, maybe you've cooked with little children before. It's fun when it's your own family member and it's your own kitchen. When there's several of them and you don't speak their native language and they're running around, it's scary. Actually, it can be scary. You fear for their safety. So no, would I go back to teaching kindergarten again? Absolutely not. But it was the only thing that I had available to me, so I did it. John, you're muted.
Yeah, I was afraid I was giving you that feedback. I also wonder about your engagement with your young colleagues. I mean, what was that like? Was it a lonely time, just you and Steve, or were you able to engage with these younger teachers?
So we had two sets of young colleagues. One was the other English teachers that we met during orientation, and they were very sweet with us. They kept saying things like, "I can't imagine my parents doing this. I can't imagine my grandparents doing this," because here we are in our 60s and they're in their 20s. So yeah, we were grandparent age. They were like marveling at us and very sweet to us as a result. And sort of similarly, the other teachers in our school were that way, but it was a little bit sad because in terms of a social life, we couldn't we did socialize a little bit with them, but not very much. We had such different interests and such different resources for socializing that we were friendly with them, but not connected in a strong way, with one exception. So we were the two Americans at school. There were also two Chinese teachers at school. They were very young, just had graduated college, and apparently China has a program where they send recent college graduates to other countries to teach the Chinese language. So our kids in our class were learning Thai. They had a short Thai lesson every week, and also Chinese. The Thai government wants Thai kids to speak Chinese as well. And those two girls, I call them girls, they're young women, but they sort of adopted us as grandparent figures because they had aspirations both of coming to America to teach Chinese. So those were our main social connections at school. And yeah, that was something we missed a lot. We didn't have many people our own age to socialize with, and nobody really who shared our cultural baggage or background to kind of relate the day's news to. I mean, there just was it was a different culture, and that was interesting, but also after a while got to be a little lonely.
Mhm. A couple more questions from chat. Here's one. You said you can leave your parents. Mine are 93 and frail. It's tough. If
Mhm.
they need me, even communicating their needs will be challenging. My siblings are far flung in Texas, California, Western Canada. I'm the local child approaching retirement.
Mm.
Any thoughts or advice there?
Yeah, I definitely hear you, and I have to say, when I broached the subject with my own mother, who at the time was 95, um, I if she had said, "Please don't go," I would have stayed home because I didn't know how much more time I'd have with her. But she said, "Go, go have some fun or have an adventure." If that's not the case in your situation, and you do want to do something similar, then you might look at these volunteer programs. So the one I mentioned, Global Volunteers, you can volunteer for as short a time as 1 week. And maybe for 1 week, another family member could be the on-call person for your folks. I get that. We're kind of a sandwich generation, or maybe it's a club sandwich now with more layers. But yeah, leaving the elderly parents behind is hard, and it was hard for us when we were we were all halfway around the world. So time zone, we were 12 hours difference. So even just having a conversation by phone, of course my mother's hard of hearing, so that doesn't work well even when we're in the same time zone, but that wasn't even very possible, which is why I sent all of these email messages with the stories, which is what led to writing the book. So there was a silver lining there, but I completely understand that hesitation and the difficulty, but maybe there are some ways around it.
Another question from the chat. You were fortunate to do this with your husband. What
Mhm.
about retirement as a widow, having worked over 60 years? Yes, now in late 80s. What do you suggest?
Well, congratulations on a 60-year career. You doubled the length of time I was working professional. That's beautiful. I actually think you would have some better success as a single person than we had as a couple. And here's why. It sounds okay. So maybe, when you're lost, in a place that you don't know, and neither one of you could, and one of you is lost, but the other one can figure out or remembers the breadcrumb trail better, then it's useful to have a partner. But it's not so useful to have a partner from a social perspective. So I think that the challenge that I mentioned when John asked about socializing with these young people, I think that would have been different if Steve wasn't there. If I was by myself, I would have been invited to more gatherings with the other teachers. I would have learned Thai because I would have had to. I wouldn't have had anybody to speak English in the apartment with. Uh, I think I would have more um, become part of the community, and less relied on a spouse for support. It was a good thing for our marriage. We learned that we could be together 24/7. We had never done that before in our entire lives. And of course, that prepared us for the pandemic when that's exactly what we had to do. But in a way, I think you'd have there are some advantages to trying it on your own, and I wouldn't hesitate if you feel up for it. I would definitely encourage you to give it a shot.
Another question from the chat room. How did you like Thailand? And did you travel while you were there?
Yeah, so Thailand, interestingly, we had been to Thailand on our honeymoon. So almost exactly 30 years earlier, we had been to Thailand as tourists, and we had sort of seen highlights in Bangkok and in Chiang Mai and in one coastal resort town. Um, Coming back 30 years later, some things hadn't changed. The climate is still atrocious. The air pollution is still horrible. But in Bangkok, for example, the whole skyline is different. I mean, it really has, the city has grown. It was a huge city before, but it's even huger now, and lots of skyscrapers. And there's a very beautiful modern mass transit system, which makes a huge difference, because trying to get through the traffic and pollution on the streets of Bangkok was really hard before. Now it's somewhat easier. The country is beautiful. Uh, the people are beautiful. I mean, physically, absolutely beautiful. I mean, I couldn't stop staring at just everybody I encountered. Stunning people with beautiful smiles. It's called the land of smiles, and it's for real. I mean, people smile a lot, and are genuinely open and nice. It's a different culture. It's a very Buddhist culture. 93% of the population is Buddhist, and it's a collectivist culture. So there's a strong focus on making sure everybody's happy and avoiding conflict. That, in general, a good thing. We should all try to do that a little bit more. But it did lead to some kind of stresses when there was really a problem that needed to be dealt with. It was kind of hard to broach the subject because mostly people wanted to avoid discussing problems. The food was excellent. And as I said, we ate most of our meals from street vendors, and no problem. We never got sick. Everything was yummy. Sometimes we couldn't finish it. We couldn't eat our food because the spice level was off the charts, and that we just had to learn to. We that vocabulary we learned. My pedka means not spicy, please. But it's an interesting place to visit. You have to deal with the heat, though. We were there during what was supposed to be the cool season, which meant daytime highs were only in the 90s every single day, and nighttime lows in like the upper 70s. So it was hard.
Well, before we go, tell us about your next chapter. What do you have in store? Have you thought forward about what you're going to do next?
Well, as I mentioned, our teaching experience in Italy was very fulfilling, and we definitely would like to do that sort of thing again elsewhere. Um, Continuing to teach at Washington English Center, as I said, we were teaching this term, and today is graduation. We'll be teaching winter term as well. We co-teach there as in the same classroom, so that's kind of fun. This writing bug has kind of taken hold, and I continue to write essays, and I'm continuing to teach yoga. So kind of a little bit more of the same for the short term, and we also just became new grandparents, and so that's a whole nother chapter, and I'm sure that will lead to other stories. So if we're saying goodbye shortly, could I take a moment and teach you all one little word in Thai?
Yes.
Great. So put your hands together in front of your heart. I say this in my yoga classes too. Put your hands together in front of your heart. Bow your head and say "Sawadi."
So what?
Sawasdee.
It means hello. It also means goodbye. And if you're a woman or identify female, you say sawatika. Sawatika. If you're a man, you say sawatikrap. Sawatikrap. And with a sawati to say hello and goodbye, you can go anywhere in Thailand and people will give you a smile and welcome you.
Well, thank you, Dian Seidel, for sharing your adventure with us and all your advice about how to make a rich retirement.
Thank
And
you,
thanks
John.
to,
It's been a complete pleasure.
and thanks to all of you in our audience for being with us on this installment of our speaker series. We invite you to explore other programming listed on the Chevy Chase at Home website and to consider joining our village or your local village as a member or a volunteer. Thanks again, and I hope everyone has a great rest of the day.
Happy New Year to you all. Sawatika.
Sawatika.